we invite you to enjoy some of the best stories the Wall Street Journal has produced this year. We begin with a story you may have heard, but did you know about the love story behind the most expensive work of art ever sold at auction?
It doesn't provide comfort, this image, but it does look to eternity. The beauty of that face is so compelling that it really helped me through a very difficult period. So it was particularly hard to say goodbye to it because it was almost like saying goodbye to my husband again.
When I first saw the painting, had it here in New York, when it was shipped, it was acquired in a regional auction. I recognized that there was such tremendous quality visible in what one could see. The idea that I had was that maybe if it were cleaned, that it might be able to be restored to a point that it could be attributed to one of Leonardo's close followers.
I've known Robert for a very long time. Robert brought the picture over. I'm a conservator of paintings. You have a privileged relationship with the work of art that no one else who works with the arts does. You have a really kind of intimate understanding of everything about it, how the artist worked, how the artist changed his mind as he went along. I was retouching the picture and I was studying it. There were a lot of changes, pentimenti, of a major sort, which had already been exposed. There was this pentiment of the blessing hand, there was the pentiment of the thumb.
It's a fantasy to find a lost treasure of this sort. One has learned as a kind of a sober person and as a responsible art historian not to allow such dreams to get in the way of objective looking at the painting.
Between the time I first saw it and the time that I really began working on it, Mario died. My husband, Mario Modestini, was a very great restorer. He's really considered, the most important restorer of Italian paintings of the 20th century. There was nobody that I could experience paintings with in the same way that I had with him. The painting became a way for me to kind of keep him alive in my mind because I would talk to him as I was working on it. I, conjured him as I was working on it because we'd had, so many conversations that I could actually know what he was going to say and what he would think. He was probably the best person in the world that one could have a dialogue with about this picture.
As Diane started to find very interesting, very promising things in the course of her restoration, the research continued and more pieces of the puzzle fell together.
Because of the way it was painted, you sort of couldn't really see the transitions if you were looking close up where I was retouching it. But as soon as you stood back, it resolved. There's a loss in the upper lip. I was trying to match it and I couldn't, avoid the conclusion any longer that this was absolutely by Leonardo. No one else could have painted it. I miss it. I missed it when it was sold, and I will miss it when it's sold from Christie's. I think Leonardo was really doing his very best to put into an image his ideas about the universe, about infinity, and not just to depict Jesus Christ. I just hope it goes to a good home. If not an institution, then to a collector who will make it available to the public. It belongs at a museum with all the other Leonardos. It will go to the highest bidder. That's what happens at auctions.
In our next piece, we explore how the search giant Google is developing new algorithms to provide concise answers to complicated questions, and how those algorithms are and aren't working. If you're searching for the meaning of life, should you Google it?
According to Wikipedia, the meaning of life, or the answer to the question, what is the meaning of life, pertains to the significance of living or existence in general.
Maybe that's not quite the answer you were hoping for, but Google is working on it. The search engine giant wants to be the oracle for most of life's questions. Google already handles more than 90% of the world's internet searches. The company became the world's go-to search engine by building a simple, reliable way for users to sift through vast amounts of content, a ranked list of thousands of sources based on how often websites cite each other. Now, it's expanding a different format that delivers a single answer above all other results, the featured snippet. It's all part of a race among tech companies to win users with more intelligent virtual assistants and speakers that can answer questions immediately without the need to see a screen. But things are getting a little complicated. Google used to rely on something called the Knowledge Graph, an internal encyclopedia with more than 1 billion entries for answers to basic factual questions, like when is Mother's Day, or how tall is Shaq? But even that giant database can only handle a small fraction of users' queries. So the company introduced the snippet, which scrapes answers from the internet instead of the Knowledge Graph database. As a result, Google is also answering more subjective and, in some cases, unanswerable user questions. And sometimes the results are controversial or just plain wrong. To handle more queries, data shows Google's algorithm is pulling answers from less reliable sites. Query, why are Komodo dragons endangered? And this is what you get: volcanic activity, fire, and tourism. The source? A student's report from an elementary school in Edmonton, Canada. Also, Komodo dragons aren't endangered. Earlier this year, some wrong Google answers attracted attention on social media, including that several U.S. presidents were members of the Ku Klux Klan.
Google what presidents were in the KKK.
According to English forums, President Warren G. Harding, President Woodrow Wilson, President McKinley, President Calvin Coolidge, and President Harry S. Truman.
After finding that 1 in 400 of its automated search results included offensive or clearly misleading content, Google said it would improve its search algorithm and make it easier for users to flag inaccuracies. Google says the answers it surfaces are a reflection of what people are searching for and what's available on the web. This can sometimes lead to results that are unexpected, inaccurate, or offensive. A review of Google's answers shows the company appears to have disabled featured snippets for many queries that touch on contested issues, such as politics and religion. Data also shows that Google has slightly reduced the prevalence of featured snippets in recent months, though those rates are still much higher than a year ago. The company says it doesn't fiddle with the automated results, but it does shut off the answer service for some queries because they violate company policy, such as adult content or instructions on how to make drugs. Industry observers say inaccuracies or bias in featured snippets are troubling because they appear to have the backing of Google as a single authoritative answer to a question. And Google and other search engines are among the most trusted sources in the world. A 2016 survey across 25 countries showed 64% of respondents trusted search engines, the best rate of any source, versus 57% who trusted traditional media and 41% who trusted social media. To be sure, Google's answers are almost always right. A study found that Google search answered 74% of the questions with 97% accuracy, and Google Home was correct 91% of the time. Both accuracy rates are better than Apple's, Amazon's, and Microsoft's. Apple says it limits its answers to questions that have clear, factual answers. Amazon says it has improved its results since the study was published. Microsoft says it is constantly updating and refining its virtual assistant. Google is hoping its answers will be a home run with consumers.
Have they finally decided on the best assistant? I hope it's me. I've been trying so hard.
Next, we introduce you to 24-year-old Max Deutsch. He's challenged himself to learn and master a new skill every month for a year. For his final challenge, he's going to beat chess grandmaster Magnus Carlsen. At least, that's the plan.
The final challenge is to defeat world champion Magnus Carlsen at a game of chess. All right, so who am I? I'm Max Deutsch. I'm 24 years old. I live in San Francisco, and I would consider myself an extreme learner. As humans, I think we always want a new challenge or to feel personal growth or experience new things, and I think learning is one of the ways to do that. In many ways, learning a new skill, the feeling you get is often akin to traveling, where you're in a new environment or you're experiencing new stimuli. And I think everyone can relate to that feeling of being in a new place and traveling. And for me, and I think for many people, learning something new can also trigger those same kinds of experiences.
Be sprinkling the fairy dust, causing mass hysteria.
The final challenge is to defeat world champion Magnus Carlsen at a game of chess. Could I reimagine or create a completely different way of thinking about chess, where that I could play a competitive game in only a month's time?
I am Magnus Carlsen from Norway. I am 26 years old and I'm currently ranked #1 in the world in chess. I have agreed to this challenge because I'm genuinely curious to what he's able to do in a month.
Do you think you'll beat you?
No, but I've been surprised before.
I first sat down to try to figure out how I could possibly play a competitive game against Magnus with only a month of training. And I very quickly realized that I just couldn't climb that chess skill ladder fast enough in a month. And so if I wasn't going to learn chess like a human, the other option I had was to learn chess like a computer. The idea is that could I build an algorithm in my computer that looks at any given chess position, and without having to go any further, any deeper, could say whether that's a favorable position or not. I would ultimately turn my brain into a very slow and slightly less sophisticated chess computer. One thing that I did not anticipate was how long it would take my computer to come up with this algorithm. And so as we're speaking right now, my computer is still chugging away. So right now, as I'm sitting here, I have nothing memorized. I think the game starts in the next 3 hours, so cutting it really close. Only Magnus has gotten to the level that Magnus plays, but most people spend years of their life getting to a very high level in this game. I've seen Magnus play on the internet, but never in person. So I'm excited to experience the first in-person game from the other side of the board. Unfortunately, I ran out of time. The chess algorithm is still processing, coming together, and as a result, I completely abandoned that approach for today and just played a normal game of chess. The first 5 moves.
No, I mean the first like 10 moves were very good.
Keeping him a little bit nervous for at least 8 moves was a minor victory. And then after move 12, my pieces were just dancing around. You were very serious. I moved my knight here and you twitched a little bit, like you realized that it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
Even though this final challenge, I didn't quite succeed in the way that I was hoping, it was one of the most interesting experiences of all the 12 challenges, so I'm definitely glad I had it.
No, I'm really curious as to how your algorithm is going to work out. But,
If it works, you up for another game?
yeah, sure.
Finally, we introduce you to twin brothers Mike and Chris Goski. After 9/11, they both answered the call and enlisted. What follows is a story of love and loss on their long journey home.
To welcome all friends, family, service members, and I would begin my remarks with expression of my gratitude for showing up in support of those that Chris left behind. The sentiment is well received and deeply appreciated. First point that will be clarified is that Chris was not a victim, he was a warrior. And as warriors have done for thousands of years, he willingly stepped forward in defense of his country. He did so to the best of his ability, firm in his beliefs, and in the knowledge that he went in defense of his family and of his home.
Staff Sergeant Christopher Ray Goski of the United States Marine Special Operation Command was deployed 6 times in 11 years, including 4 times in Iraq and once in Afghanistan. This video is assembled from footage shot by Chris and his fellow troops. It's a story about war and about brotherhood.
Let's go. Keep going. All Americans, sit up.
We always refer to the infantry, or the grunts, as our little brothers. It causes an unending anguish to think that our little brothers are still out there, fighting and dying. He felt that it was his place to be there alongside them to provide his leadership and support. He is at peace now, and in the company of the fallen soldiers and Marines whose deaths hurt him so deeply.
Chris Goski was born on May 1st, 1981. Mike followed a few minutes later. It's the way it would always be. They grew up in Red Oak, Texas, a small town just south of Dallas.
As children, they were very gentle, very loving. They were well behaved. They respected the elderly.
They interacted like 2 little, bear cubs, 2 little puppy dogs. They would just roll on top of each other, wrestle, play, laugh.
We had 3 bedrooms, but they insisted on sharing the same room. They were best friends, and they had their own language, which they fine-tuned throughout their adult years.
Kathy and Tim had a 3rd child, JP. Tim grew more religious, and after years of struggling with his drinking, quit. The twins were in their early teens, heading in the opposite direction.
When they were about 13 or 14, they just made a left turn.
They started getting in trouble at school. They skipped school. They had a party at our house with like 50 kids on a school day.
Mike and Chris were real fighters. For about 5 or 6 years, they just fought. And they always backed each other up. They always backed each other's play.
Chris was very quick to open his mouth and say what he thought. Mike did his share of talking, don't get me wrong, but Chris was typically the first one to run his mouth.
The boys abused drugs and alcohol. They dropped out of high school. In 1999, Chris revealed he'd ripped off a drug dealer and was in danger. He ended up staying with family in New Jersey, got sober, aced calculus in junior college. But by late summer 2001, he was back in Texas and in rehab. He was 20 years old. At 9:03 a.m. on September 11, 2001, Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. It entered a few floors above the offices of Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, where the twins' cousin worked. By chance, she wasn't in the building, but no one could reach her. The South Tower collapsed at 10:03. The North Tower stood for another 23 minutes.
Mike and Chris took it very personal, as we all did, and they answered the bell and wanted to go to war.
Both of them were like, hell no, not here. Our grandfathers did their job, we're gonna do our job.
Chris enlisted in the Marine Corps on September 12th. By January 2003, he was serving in Djibouti.
He was dedicated, he was exceptionally good at what he did. He actually had found his place in life.
Mike graduated from boot camp at Fort Benning in June 2003. 2 months later, he was in Afghanistan with the Army's 10th Mountain Division, a designated marksman.
I was proud of them, and I was scared to death every time they were deployed because they were always on the front lines. They told me not to worry. They knew what they were doing and they'd be safe and they'd be home.
Chris began his first combat assignment in August 2004 in Iraq. It was a time of suicide bombings, sectarian violence, and deadly attacks on coalition soldiers.
That was fucking close.
The Marines made Chris a forward observer, coordinating air attacks from the front lines.
Hey, get on the radio, Goski.
29604 60310. How copy, over? Roger that. Light him up. I probably shouldn't have said that on there. Light him up.
Chris left Iraq in February 2005. His brother Mike deployed to Sadr City that August. He survived a Humvee accident and several IEDs. Chris returned in February 2006 as the Battle of Ramadi began. Firefights were commonplace. A fellow Marine was mortally wounded trying to spot enemy snipers from a rooftop. Chris helped retrieve the dying man.
When he came back, he started having what he thought was a heart attack. And what it was panic attacks, okay? I mean, you know, the war is starting to affect you after your third tour.
Yeah, the war's over, right? That's why they just found an IED 100 meters back. Everything's fine, quit worrying.
6 years after the World Trade Center attack, Chris began his fourth deployment, his third in Iraq.
See the rubble? They're knocking down the buildings. They're all gutted and shit.
Chris brought a video camera. Mostly, he just let it run.
This thing's awesome. You can battle roster number radio on it and shit.
Yeah?
I got a helmet cam I can put on my Kevlar. Decent little view of the area.
Yeah. Just what I thought. Trees and more fucking trees. At least there's nowhere for a sniper to fucking pick us off and pour out.
I would say no way. It could happen. He'd have to be on one of these buildings over here. We're gonna run the gauntlet back down to Taji tonight. Woo! Hit a couple more IEDs. Just for the record, if I get blown up, I want to be cremated, put in an artillery round, and fired into the city of Ramadi. Fucking traffic jam. Beautiful city of Ramadi. For the video. Sinclair. He's a mean motor scooter. They're perf nasty. The infamous. Yeah, hey, one of the things they found the other day was in one of the manholes, dude. It was like a fucking 120 Arty round in a manhole. And just for the video down there, we're currently northeast of the city of Ramadi, walking up to one of the boat launch sites in the fucking shark fin area to the northeast of the city, about 2 clicks. And that is the Euphrates. The bad guys like to bring supplies across the river here, so some hidden boats over here.
On December 10, 2008, Mike's wife, Alexis, gave birth to twin boys. They named them Mike and Chris. Chris returned to Iraq in March 2009, a few months after his own daughter was born. Mike joined the Green Berets and was back in Iraq in July. Chris underwent training to join Marine Corps Special Operations Forces. In November 2010, he deployed to a small outpost in northwest Afghanistan. The fighting was intense, and Chris was exhausted. He took pills to wake up, and he took pills to go to sleep. On April 24, 2011, Chris's close friend David Day, the team's explosives expert, was killed trying to defuse a bomb. Chris retrieved Dave's helmet and jawbone. There was nothing else left. On one of Chris's last missions in June 2011, the Marines were caught in a day-long firefight. Chris called in airstrikes, some very close to his own position. His friend Bill died in the firefight. He was 23. Chris blamed himself.
Not all combat wounds are physical, nor do they end casualties like immediately. A teammate of his told me a day or two ago that they consider him to be the final Marine killed in action from the recent combat deployment. I know he is at peace now, and he will always be with us.
Chris had served in the Marines 11 years. His commanding officer called him a battlefield multiplier. He'd been diagnosed with anxiety and depression. He had back, foot, and neck injuries. He had been drinking, and he was broke. On June 10, 2012, Christopher J. Goski shot himself with the gun his brother had given him as a present a few years earlier. He was 31 years old.
Position of attention. Move. Staff Sergeant Webb. Here, sir. Staff Sergeant Graver. Here, sir. Staff Sergeant Goski. Staff Sergeant Christopher Goski. Staff Sergeant Christopher R. Goski.
The first year, he seemed okay. He was still active. He would go hunting and fishing and see old friends, and he stayed busy. But as time went, he got worse and worse and worse. He kept it from us.
Mike had left active duty. He was in constant pain. He had neck and back injuries, a tear in his stomach, a traumatic brain injury. After troubles at home, Alexis left with the twins. Mike lost his house and moved in with his parents. He told his friends they didn't seem real to him anymore, that they were cartoon characters to him. He was armed and increasingly paranoid.
It was very scary. And here's a Green Beret. I mean, he could do anything. You know, he would just forget. We'd be talking and he'd go, "What was I just saying?" And he goes, "I'm afraid I'm going to be this way forever."
He got high on cans of keyboard cleaner. It made him hallucinate.
He came running out into the living room looking for Chris. He said, I got you, Chris, I got you. And I was sitting in a chair over there, and I'm like, "Wake up, Mike, wake up. Are you sleepwalking? Are you having a bad nightmare?" He's like, "No, I found Chris. I found Chris." I think for 4 years he was looking for Chris. Half of him died when Chris died.
On July 4th, 2016, Sergeant First Class Michael J. Goski died of acute poisoning from inhaling dust off in his apartment in Clarksville, Tennessee. Over 11 years, he served overseas 6 times, including 5 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was awarded a Bronze Star. He was 35 years old.
Yeah, I'm proud of them. They did what, maybe what they were here to do. I don't know. How can I not be proud of them?
In the event of his death, Mike had asked to be buried in his brother's grave at Dallas-Fort Worth National Cemetery. And so he was.
To find these videos and more, go to wsj.com/video or find us on social media by searching WSJ. Thanks for joining us.